Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to a world exclusive, Australian exclusive review of the brand new watch by Christopher Ward, the C12 Loco. And my goodness, the name is thoroughly appropriate. This thing is insane. Just look at it. Can you imagine 5 years ago if somebody told you that this was the latest 2025 release by Christopher Ward? What an incredible trajectory the brand has been on with the Bel Canto, the 12, the 12X, and now this thing. And you know what? There are distinct elements of both the 12 and the Bel Canto in the design of this, the C12 Loco, but this watch does a number of things to push the brand and its aspirations even further than either of their previous flagship models. I got sent one of these to play with a couple of weeks ago now, but it has been under embargo until this very second, 7 PM British summertime on the 23rd of April. So here we are. And I'm sure you saw the pop-up, but I'll always tell you anyway. This video is sponsored by Christopher Ward. I will therefore of course leave a link to their website in the description of the video. I've got a lot of macro and super macro of the watch. I've got plenty of wrist shots indoors and outdoors, etc, etc. So if you are interested in one of these or just interested in having a look at one of these, stay tuned. Now I should point out that this watch is a prototype, and as such Christopher Ward gave me a number of moans and niggles of their own when they sent me the watch. There are some light scratches on the case here and there, some printing that they weren't happy about on the bridge, and apparently some substandard finishing on the dial wings. To be honest though, you would never pick any of that up with the naked eye, and I'm struggling even to pick up most of their list of imperfections with my macro lenses. So what is the C12 Loco then? Well, it's Christopher Ward's latest foray into affordable haute horology, or at least that is how they are pitching this one. It features their second in-house caliber, somewhat confusingly called the CW003, which features a whopping 144-hour or 6-day power reserve and a custom-designed free-sprung balance wheel. That is really the highlight feature. It's the feature that dominates the dial of this one in the way that the chiming mechanism dominated the dial of the Bel Canto. Now, I was well warned by my contact at Christopher Ward that if I wanted to take static shots of the balance wheel, to do so before I wound the watch, because it would be 144 hours again before it stopped, because the watch does not hack. Now, obviously being an excitable fool, I did not heed his advice. I wound it straight out of the box and then had to wait several days for the movement to run out of juice. You can see here, I'm sure, the tiny screws used to adjust that free-sprung balance wheel, keeping this one within a maximum of 7 seconds per day variance. Now you see them, now you don't when the balance wheel springs into life. I'm sure you also spotted the big twin barrels beneath the display caseback, allowing for that enormous power reserve. There's plenty of going on with this design both at the front and the back, but it's all symmetrical, which is really rather nice. All right, let's take it back a couple of steps. Let's go through the basics, the dimensions and the specifications before going on to discuss the price tag. The C12 is 41mm in diameter with a thickness of 14mm lug to lug. Now, lug to lug is a difficult one to measure. It's 44 if you take it to the edge of the case, 47.5 if you take it to the outer tips of those male end links. Effectively, therefore, it's somewhere in between. Lug width is not applicable today. Now, as you saw, they sent me the rubber strap version, but the C12 is also available with an integrated style steel bracelet with a built-in quick release mechanism. Weight, well, I can't obviously quote the weight on the bracelet. I can only quote it on the rubber strap. It's 98 grams. Water resistance, like the Bel Canto, is 30 meters, and the movement, we already discussed that one. It's a CW003. What about the price then? Well, I believe the C12 is Christopher Ward's most expensive non-limited watch to date. These are priced from £3,800, which is $4,600 for a watch on a rubber strap, up to £3,995 or $4,825 for the integrated stainless steel bracelet option. Check your own import taxes though, of course. This clearly then sits in the same very top bracket of Christopher Ward products as the similarly priced 12X and Bel Canto. I will of course return to the price a little later on. Let's have another look at the watch then, and it's a big piece of double domed, almost top hat sapphire to accommodate the wheel bridge, which seems to be the tallest thing on the dial surface. It's essentially a 12 case in stainless steel, and like the 12, there are 12 facets to the bezel and the case back and the bottom section of the case itself, meaning this thing is just full of angles. But you only really see them though when viewing the watch from the side. The 12-sided bezel is actually quite subtle when viewed from the top. The rubber strap looks like most FKM style rubbers fitted elsewhere in the Christopher Ward lineup. It's soft, it's comfortable, it's really flexible, and it's nicely colour matched to the dial in this case. And it has a beautifully milled and machined deployant clasp here as well. The clasp is quite chunky though, but a bit of weight is no bad thing to balance out the not inconsiderable head of the watch. And just before we get it on wrist, let's look at the dial and hands again. Obviously the indices, the hour hand and the minute hand are all very reminiscent of the Bel Canto, with the pinion sprouting as it does from halfway between the middle of the dial and the 12 o'clock position. Small hour markers are applied on top of a clear disc, and there is a further applied chapter ring beyond that with minute markers. The balance wheel does encroach a little bit on the chapter ring and it takes out the index at 6, but I like the fact that they've put the word Swiss made either side of where it would be. There's a vertical brush metallic section either side of that upper section of the dial, a couple of screws on each half holding that together, and then on the bottom half of the face there are those two bridges for the balance wheel, also with visible screws. The bottom half of the dial doesn't have the metallic brush to it though, and if I show you the outside shot you can see just how dynamic that brush section and the angle between the two halves of the dial becomes when you move the watch around in natural light. It's very much a case of if you love the 12 and the Bel Canto, then you'll love the Loco as well. They do have a very similar feel, and that applies to the on-wrist experience as well. I must say they all make really easy watches to live with on a regular basis. They may be pushing into that haute horology bracket with their grand designs and complications, but because the case is fundamentally traditional in both size and shape, you don't actually feel like you're wearing anything too far out of the ordinary. 14mm is quite thick though, but it disguises that thickness well, and in this instance anyway, the rubber strap ensures that the overall weight is quite reasonable. But because most of that weight is in the watch head, 70 of the 98 grams to be precise, you're probably going to be wearing this one relatively tight, but there is enough natural flex within the FKM rubber to allow you to do that comfortably. Now I've got a 7-inch wrist, as you will be well aware if you are a regular viewer of the channel. It fits me nicely, and like I said, it feels surprisingly conventional whilst looking entirely unconventional. And if you are indeed a regular viewer of the channel, you know that as nice as this colour is, I'm just not into blue watches. So what other choices are there if you are also not a fan of blue? Well, you can have the blue one on 2 rubbers or bracelet. Now I cannot obviously comment on the bracelet, but it'll probably be similar, if not indeed identical, to the one on the 12. There is a white watch which they call Alabaster, again on 2 different rubbers or a bracelet. There's a sensible black, if indeed this watch could ever be deemed to be sensible. And there is what is undoubtedly my favourite, Frisco, bright orange. Again, 2 rubber straps and a bracelet for this one. I gotta say, that looks amazing. Orange is a hard colour to get right, but I think Christopher Ward have absolutely nailed this one. Alright then, moans and niggles. Legibility both by day and after dark is obviously compromised by the fact that there's a tiny handset at the top section of a relatively large dial. So this watch is not for you if you demand instant at-a-glance legibility from your watches with or without the lights on. And with only 3 atmospheres, 30 meters of water resistance, this watch is also not for you if you demand to go swimming with your watches. As noted, there were a few little QC issues with this prototype. I am sure they will clean that up for production units. They had better, given the fact that these cost $5 grand US on the bracelet, give or take. that is quite intentionally pushing the envelope for Christopher Ward as a brand. So if you are interested in one of these, you're going to have to get your head around paying Tudor money or even Omega money for a Christopher Ward. Although, of course, you're not just getting a basic three-hander from Christopher Ward for £5 grand, you're getting something much more akin to affordable hot horology. Now, the Bel Canto has proved beyond any doubt that people are prepared to spend big dollars on a Christopher Ward. However, I think that the C12 Loco's biggest competition will come from within its own stable. I think a lot of people will look at this one and then look at the Bel Canto, which already has a bit of a reputation as a model, and if they're tossing up between the two, I reckon most of them will opt for the Bel Canto instead. Perhaps therefore the C12 is in fact for people who already have a Bel Canto, who've already stumped up big money on a CW, who have already crossed that bridge, so to speak, and are therefore prepared to do it again for a different model and for a different complication. Do you know what? I reckon if 25% of the people who have bought a Bel Canto go on to buy one of these, that would probably do Christopher Ward nicely. Like I said at the very beginning of the video, it has been fascinating to see the trajectory that CW has taken as a brand. And it's always a real treat for me to enjoy and play around with watches like this. But as ever, I hope that they don't forget their roots, and I hope they continue to produce watches at around the $1,000 price point, as well as these more esoteric pieces, because the relatively affordable stuff is also excellent quality. So there you have it. What do you think of this one? I am looking forward to the comment section today. How many of you watching are proud owners of a Bel Canto, and how many would consider adding a Loco to your collection as well? Conversely, how many just can't get their head around spending £5 grand on a Christopher Ward, no matter how exotic it is? Leave me a comment, let me know your thoughts. Well, I've referenced the 12X and the Bel Canto a number of times, so you should really check out my full reviews on those two if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you again in the next one.